Yeah. My name is Barbara Keshen, and I am presently serving as the chair of the New Hampshire Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. But that's not the reason that I'm speaking to you here today. I'm speaking to you here today because I spent a great deal of my career practicing homicide law. I spent many years in the New Hampshire Attorney General's office and many years with the New Hampshire Public Defender's Office. And between the two of them, I handled approximately 100 homicide cases. So I know very well the kind of resources, energy, and time that it takes to put together a homicide case. And that's what I'm going to base my testimony here today. I want to touch very briefly on the civil liberties portion of this bill, because the civil liberties portion of this bill doesn't say that it would have the death penalty for people who voted or participated in civic activity. It said it would be any, if they were killed in violation of any civil right. And the New Hampshire Constitution, unlike the U.S. Constitution, there's a civil right, there's a constitutional right to life. That means that as we're sitting here, as you're out on the street corner, you're exercising a civil right. If someone kills you, anytime they take your life, they violate your constitutional rights. What that means is that there's no discretion for the Attorney General. Right now, there are 7 specific actions that could result in prosecution for a capital murder. If you pass this law, there are no guidelines for the Attorney General. Whatever a person wants to do, they have unfettered discretion to bring a charge if they want to. So that's something that you should consider. But what I really want to address is this terrorism aspect of the bill. Let's assume for the sake of argument that people who commit terrorist acts should face the possibility of a death sentence. Just for argument's sake, we'll assume that. There are 2 reasons that you should not pass this bill. The first is, of course, that it's unnecessary. And the federal government is there. If you have any concerns at all about whether or not the federal government would prosecute a terrorist act on New Hampshire soil, call the U.S. Attorney, Emily Rice, 225-1552, and speak to her about what the federal position would be. But the second one is the resource issue represented today, and I want to spend quite a bit of time on that. I'll tell you right now that I tried to speak, I did speak actually to some of the attorneys that were involved in this prosecution and defense, just to try to get some sense of what the numbers are, because the numbers to this day have not been published about how much it has cost. And although they were kind in speaking to me, they're not giving me any information. So the information that I have for you comes from essentially public sources, newspaper articles and such. What are the kind of resources that it would take to actually prosecute a terrorist case? Chris Keating is going to talk to you a little bit about what it cost the court just to try a capital case, the case of Michael Addison, as opposed to a first-degree murder trial. So I'm not going to talk to you about that, but basically it was exponentially greater than just to prosecute a capital case than it was to prosecute just a typical first-degree murder case. A terrorism case goes way beyond that. In any kind of a trial, a criminal trial, there are basically 3 entities that that the taxpayers are paying for. The first is the court system itself, the second is the prosecution, and the third, more than likely, is going to be the defense, because most of these people aren't going to be able to afford attorneys. So what are the costs for each of them? Again, I'll let Chris talk to the cost for the court. But when you keep in mind what the cost for the court is, keep in mind this, that the Sarnaev trial itself took 4 months to try. 4 months to try, and 14 months to bring to trial. And that was really at lightning speed for these kinds of cases. In the Sarnaev case, there were 4 prosecutors that were assigned full-time to the case. And it doesn't seem like that many. After all, there are 2 in a homicide case that are always assigned. And in the Addison case, there were 4 attorneys that were assigned. However, one of the attorneys that was assigned as the lead prosecutor in the Sarnaev case was the deputy chief of the Anti-Terrorism and National Security Unit. So that person had specific training in how to put together a case of this nature. New Hampshire, we don't have any kind of training like that. In addition to the prosecutor's office, there were, and the prosecutors that were involved, the prosecutor's office contracted with specially trained trauma counselors who shepherded the witnesses and victims throughout the trial in that case. And one of them is one of my best friends for 40 years, and when I asked her to tell me how much she was paid, she said she couldn't. Defense attorneys. There were 5 defense attorneys that worked full-time on the Sarnaev case, and that is typical. That's going to happen anywhere, under any circumstances. The federal defenders were primarily responsible for Sarnaev's defense. And the federal prosecutors in Massachusetts are very well trained, highly experienced attorneys. You're not going to find attorneys any better than that. And yet, they had to hire outside counsel, attorneys that were specifically trained in death penalty cases, to go beyond their offices to handle that case. The amount of time and resources that go into any murder case, let alone a capital case and let alone a terrorism case, just cannot be overstated. First of all, there will be hundreds, if not thousands, of investigator hours that go into putting together the facts of the case and interviewing witnesses. Then each side will consult with a battery of experts. That's true in almost any homicide case, but in a terrorism case, it's certainly true. So what kind of experts are we talking about? And not just for one side, not just for the prosecutor side, not for the defense side, but for both sides. We're talking about experts such as, of course, the medical examiners. The state has one, but the defense will hire one. Serologists, blood spatter experts, DNA experts, psychologists, psychiatrists, lab technicians, mitigation specialists, jury consultants. That's just to name a few off the top of my head. The amount of experts in a case like this is staggering. And they're all consulted and they all have to be paid. Most trial attorneys will tell you that for every hour that they spend of trial in a courtroom, there's approximately 40 hours of preparation that goes into it. And I can tell you from my own experience that that's a good ratio. But I handle typical cases. I handle, typical first-degree murder cases, second-degree murder cases. 1 hour for 40 hours, not of my time, but the experts, the police, everyone. In the case, I was involved in one capital murder case, and the 40-to-1 ratio, folks, just falls by the wayside. I don't know how many hours we all put into the case just for 1 hour of trial time. This wasn't the Addison case, it was a case that ended in a plea. For a terrorism case, I can't even begin to imagine how many hours go into the preparation of a case like that. And the taxpayers would be paying every single hour of everyone's bill. So to this date, there has been no accounting of how much it cost to terminate our case. But it's certainly not an exaggeration to say, especially based on what you know about the Addison case, that it cost tens of millions of dollars to prosecute that case. So my question to you is simple. Does New Hampshire have the kind of money that it would take to prosecute a case like that? And if you don't, then it's irresponsible to pass a bill when you know that you can't actually pay to enforce it. A better use of resources, if you have that kind of money and you'd like to spend it, would be to spend a fraction of that cost to assist crime victims now through counseling or through funding the cold case unit. So for all of those reasons, I suggest that you say this bill is ITO. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. You mentioned the Sinai case, and he had 4 victims, and the Addison case, and he had one victim. Those 5 people, what were their lives worth?
Their lives are incalculable. They are absolutely incalculable. And that's not the question here.
I disagree.
Manager Pudding?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your testimony. My question is, in Sandy Hook shooting, would that be considered a terrorism because it was more than 4 deaths?
You know, I don't, under the statute, I don't know.
Hobo has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your testimony. My question relates to the domestic perpetrator versus a foreign perpetrator. Are they treated differently, and would this law affect a foreign war agent?
When you say this law, do you mean this statute or the
Yes.
federal law?
This statute.
I assume that it would apply to anyone, just the way the federal statute would apply to whoever comes over and commits a terrorist act.
Question.
Do foreign agents have constitutional rights in order to go through this process?
You know, yes. I mean, if there is a crime that is committed, if there is a crime that is committed on this soil, and it is a criminal, it is a criminal nature, then I think the federal agents would say that they apply federal law to that person.
Thank you.
Okay. I do have, thank you very much, and
I think there's one more question. Representative Cushing had his finger up, so I assume that means he wanted to ask a question.
Comment on how, on our criminal justice system as a prosecutor, or as a defense attorney, on how accurate prosecutions are. I know you're involved in a case involving, if you want to share that or not.
well, I mean, I'll tell you as a prosecutor,
I couldn't hear the question.
I asked her if she could share any of her experience as either defendant on the fallibility of our state's criminal justice.
I can, but as a prosecutor, I thought we were infallible, but realistically, I knew that we weren't. And as a defense attorney, I know that I was involved in at least one case that probably many of you have heard testimony about in the past, and that's the Richard Buchanan case. Mr. Buchanan was accused of killing his girlfriend's 7-year-old child. And she was killed and raped virtually, if he were asleep in his bedroom, she was killed and raped in the next door bedroom. I mean, virtually spitting distance away. And it was the state and I, who represented him, thought it would be impossible for anyone else to have broken in and killed Elizabeth Knapp. I mean, it just would have been an impossibility to think that anyone else had been involved in it. Richard had been drinking the night that Elizabeth was killed. There were lots of reasons to think that it had to be him. She was raped. Who else could have done it? I'll say, fortunately, the person that raped Elizabeth didn't wear a condom because it turned out that it wasn't Richard Buchanan. It wasn't the person that was sleeping, 10 feet away from her. It was the upstairs neighbor who came down, who did break into the house and who managed not to wake anyone up. Broke into the house, into an apartment about the size of this room, really. Littered all over the floor with clutter, made his way into the bedroom, and raped and killed this child without waking anyone up. And I always say, if he had been wearing a condom, Richard Buchanan would be dead or on his way to execution right now. Because it was just inconceivable to think that someone else did it, but someone else did do it. And so all of us in this system have to be humbled and say that mistakes can be made. Even in the end, mistakes can be made. Does that answer your question?
I see no further questions.